coming to you live. It's In the Know with Mo. And now, here's your host, Mo Vella.
Hey everybody, welcome back. So good to have all of you with me this week. I am coming to you from sunny and awesome San Diego this week as my travels continue around the world, and I feel very blessed to be in this beautiful city with amazing people, just like all of you. I have an incredible guest this week, John Nichols, a prolific and highly internationally acclaimed political blogger. We'll get to Mr. Nichols momentarily. But in the meantime, as always, I start with my moment of truth. This week, I have a positive moment of truth. I'm so happy not to have to be sad or mad like I have been the last few times because of Supreme Court decisions and our rights being taken away. I actually wanted to give my old boss and my dear friend Joe Biden some kudos this week on my moment of truth, because I think he proved once again, I've always believed in this aspect of who he is, but he proved to all of us again that never bad mouthing Joe Manchin and actually never burning that bridge with Senator Manchin, and committed to his congeniality as he always has been. Joe Biden, in my opinion, has kept the Manchin relationship alive and healthy, and it now looks like it's going to result in legislation that will improve and enhance the lives of millions of people, and to maybe help save our planet, at least take major steps to save our planet, give more people access to health care, affordable health care, and under Obamacare, and all kinds of amazing things that are going to improve the lives of people. So I just wanted my moment of truth this week to be all of us maybe looking at Joe Biden and thanking him in our own little way. And second of all, maybe to emulate that kindness and that congeniality that he has, that ability to build bridges. And once again, it's going to pay off for all of us. So kudos, Mr. President. And I'm sure there are millions who are like me. We love you, not just because of you, not because of your politics, but we love you because of your kindness and your decency, sir. So now to the show. John Nichols. Wow, John, it's so good to have you on the show. You've written articles and blogs and all kinds of incredible articles and information, and that has been printed everything from the New York Times to the Chicago Tribune, all over the world. You're quoted in books. You're just popular. You're famous. You're in demand. It's amazing, and I can't wait to have a discussion with you on a couple of topics. But before we do that, I do want to announce your latest book. It is not your first book, right? You have several books. It is your latest book, and we do want to tell our audience about that. It is called, I want to get it right, so I'm going to read it, Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers, Accountability for Those Who Caused the Crisis. And that is John's latest book. You can find him on Twitter at Nichols Uprising, Nichols Uprising. John, welcome to In the Know with Mo. It's so nice to meet you, and it's great to have you.
It's a pleasure to be with you, my friend, and on what looks to be a sunny day for both of us.
All right. So we're going to do something. I'm going back. My producer's probably rolling his eyes because I think he gets upset when I do this, but it's just a part of who I am. Instead of jumping right into all of these wonderful articles and all your expertise, I actually want to find out, where the hell were you born? How'd your life get started? And I want to learn a little bit about who John Nichols is, because how you grew up, the kind of household you grew up in, the environment you grew up in, it kind of is why you are who you are today. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about where that was. What state were you born in?
Well, I was born in Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin.
Okay.
I'm from a very small town. When I was born, it was about 970 people. It's grown a bit since then, and I was really born into a rural progressive populist tradition. My great grandfather was a campaign manager for Robert M. La Follette and the Progressives back at the turn of the last century, and so a lot of my family's been political for a very long time. And I came up in probably what for now a lot of people on the national level, especially in the coasts, uh, would find difficult to understand. But it is a rural tradition of support for economic and social and racial justice and for peace. So I'm kind of lucky in that regard.
And you see, now I'm so glad I asked the question, because you see, it proved once again that we're products in many ways of our environment, right?
Well, very
And
much.
our upbringing. And so you were exposed to this mindset of equality and social justice from the beginning. I mean, in many ways, I can relate in so many ways, being the son of an attorney and a judge, and the nephew of an attorney and a judge, and the seventh attorney. And I can kind of understand, because you sit at the dining room table, right, John? And it's like, it's not, you don't have any choice, but that's the topic of discussion, right? And
Oh, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I was raised in a culture of political discussion. And also, I think partially because I came from a rural setting, a culture where that political discussion ranged far more widely than our contemporary political discussion. We have a very, very narrow dialogue about politics
yeah,
today. But when I mean, I grew up with people who identified as extremely on the right, very militarist, very, very, very conservative, all the way over to extremely on the left, very anti-war, and these were often at the same table, often in
yeah,
the same family, and I think historically that's something we lose sight of. It's one of the reasons why I'm always concerned about these discussions about critical race theory and the concerns about it. I mean, I think the deeper we go into our history, with all of its strengths, all of its weaknesses, all of its great accomplishments, and all of its errors, and talk about it fully, the better off we are. Because we're going to find out that all along the way there have been heroes and villains,
yeah.
and we ought to know the full story. I think it actually makes us. I think it makes us respect one another
Mm.
and respect the dialogue more.
Well, on that note, a great chance to ask you, you just said something very poignant, which was this type of division, right? I, I
Mhm.
I think, though, there's a huge difference between what we're seeing today in the division and the division you and I came up in, right?
Mhm.
Which was present, as you just beautifully stated. It was a way, it was part of our lives. I think, if I could be so bold, I would love to hear whether you agree with me or not. I think the difference is there's a lack of trust, and
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit of a lack of decency and respect for one another. And I think that's what was then existent, and now doesn't seem, it seems less existent. Maybe that's a better
Oh,
way to say it.
I think you're exactly right. And I think that that's clearly true, and we have to ask ourselves why that is.
Why? Hmm.
And the answer is pretty simple. We monetized politics.
Hmm.
Politics became all about money,
Hmm.
and as a result, a political campaign uh, is now at the presidential level. It's a multi-billion-dollar project,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even campaigns for the U.S. Senate are $100 million projects with
Yeah.
with all kinds of staff, all kinds of managers. I understand that's the dynamic. I cover it for a living, but I will tell you that impact. It's created a sense of urgency about prevailing that wasn't necessarily always the case. To give you a very good example, I come from Wisconsin, as you know, and in Wisconsin, as recently as the 1980s, Bill Proxmire, our former senator, was running for reelection with campaigns in which he took no money, not a
Wow.
single penny. And he, to the extent that he campaigned, and he did, it was out of his own pocket. He would drive
Wow.
around the state. And I was just looking the other day at a story from his 1982 campaign for reelection to the Senate, running in a serious race against a Republican state senator. It was a real contest. And Proxmire would drive around the state, stay in, as the reporter described, disheveled hotels, and make his own breakfast on a hot plate.
Wow.
You know, that's what politics was.
Yeah.
And as we've professionalized it to such an extent, and I don't mind professionals in politics, I think that's a reality of it.
Yeah.
But as it's become such an industry We have
Yeah.
found ourselves in a situation where people become often vicious because so much, to their view, so much economically and in other ways is at stake.
Wow. Oh, I am so glad you're here today. That that was seriously, I don't think that I've ever heard anybody characterize that development in politics in such an articulate way and such an accurate way. And I think we commonly overlook that impact and that influence of money in the whole system. We are going to our first break. I failed to mention you are the national affairs correspondent for The Nation, so I want to get that in there. And when we come back, you guys don't want to go anywhere. We're about to talk about one of John's recent articles that is just, again, probing. So stay with us.
Whoa, a new digital music player. Thanks, Mom.
Oh, I'm glad you like it, because I can't wait to toss the big stereo. And now that we got your dad that big HD TV he wanted, we can throw out our old TV too.
Hold up. You can't just throw out electronics.
Really?
They need to be recycled or donated.
And how would we do that?
It's so easy, Mom. Today, recycling electronics is just as easy as buying them. GreenerGadgets.org has all the info. We just enter our zip code to find a certified recycling center nearby. There are thousands of them, and new ones are being added all the time. Some of our local stores are even certified recycling locations.
I like that.
Did you know that some of the stuff in our old electronics could be used to make new products and conserve natural resources?
Well, okay then. Let's gather them up. What was that website again?
Everybody, welcome back to In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Vela, your host. Great to have all of you with us this week. I'm coming from I almost said San Antonio. That's how much I've been traveling lately. I'm in San Diego, another city of saints. But anyway, our guest this week is John Nichols, the national affairs correspondent for The Nation, a globally recognized political blogger, political writer, highly astute, incredible. We're having a very, very invigorating discussion with him, enlightening to say the least. John, I want to move to, I guess this is one of your latest articles since it's so current and fresh. I would hope it's one of your latest, right? It's called 107. I'm sorry. I must be half asleep out here on the West Coast. 187 minutes of treason. 187 minutes of treason. I want to make it less, clearly. Maybe that's how I feel about Donald Trump. The less of him, the better, right? But John, I want to talk about this article. Wow, just wow. Where do you start on this article? First of all, I appreciated that you defined what treason is. Why don't you share with our listeners and viewers how you open this article? Because I thought it was brilliant to set the foundation and the stage of the very succinct and clear definition of treason.
Sure. And I agree with you that it's important to begin with that definition, because the word gets thrown around casually at times, and people say, oh, somebody's guilty of treason because they did something I didn't like, right? Or I didn't agree with. That's not the case. And in fact, also, I think there's a fear of talking about treason because it does seem to be such an overwhelming charge. It is, the ultimate betrayal of your country.
Yeah.
And so I think it is important to go to the definition. And the definition is a simple one. If you have sworn an oath to a country, if you are, loyal to that country for some purpose, usually a political purpose, you're in a position of power, authority, and you've acknowledged that, and you've sworn that you will protect and preserve that country, protect and preserve its constitution. If you then conspire to overturn its government or to damage its governance in some sort of very serious way, that's treason, right? And that's what, as an example, before the Civil War and in the early days of the Civil War, that's what many members of the U.S. Congress, even members of the U.S. Supreme Court, engaged in, because you had a constitutional republic There was an election. Abraham Lincoln won. He won with a minority of the votes. It was a very contested, very difficult election, but he clearly won. And
Yeah.
when he took office, a substantial portion of people who had sworn an oath of loyalty to the United States then began to plot to overturn it, or at least to break it up. And you had obviously the Civil War that extended from it.
So we have instances and examples of this type of treasonous behavior, or what's been considered treason historically, correct?
Many
And we
of them.
have
Actually, there's many
numerous examples, right?
Yes, it's not. It is frankly not uncommon, and that's another thing that we tend to fetishize it. We think, oh my gosh, that's such a rare and such an unimaginable thing that we can't discuss it. In fact, we have had many instances of it throughout history, and often involving lower level players whose names you wouldn't remember, but sometimes, again, as we note, someone like a Jefferson Davis, right? People whose names we do remember.
Yeah. And now let's get back to your article as well, in the sense that I want to better understand. Let's start with the overall contention, if you will, or your statement of what you believe transpired. Let's start there and work backwards. Do you believe Donald Trump committed treason in those 187 minutes?
It certainly looks like it. Look, I'm not a judge or a jury. And in fact, well, I've got lawyers in my family. I don't think I have as many as you do. And so I'll be careful about the application of it, but I think it's appropriate to discuss it.
Yeah.
And to see it as one part of what we might consider when you look at the many possible charges that may come in the direction of Donald Trump and those associated with him. And I'm not alone in suggesting this. Glenn Kirshner, the former federal prosecutor, who is a pretty prominent figure on television discussing these things, says to his mind, the standard has been met. Former Republican Congressman, now Morning Joe host, Joe Scarborough, says it was treason. Other Joe Walsh, a former Republican congressman, says it was treason. So, you've got people saying this. And so then let's explore it. Why would they say it? Why would this become a part of our discussion? Well, here you have a situation where Donald Trump, we know that he meets the standard as someone who's sworn an oath to the country. He was in fact the president of the United States, sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. It's very well understood as such. In fact, I think most people would say has a higher duty to protect the country as the commander in chief, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely.
Then you have the reality, it's brought out by the committee, that he plotted as the principal plotter in a conspiracy to launch a coup attempt against that country. A coup attempt by necessity takes many, many different forms, but it was still such that it was, in fact, a coup attempt. And when that coup attempt was launched on January 6th, he was, as commander in chief, most powerful man in the world, in a position to, at any number of instances, to have ended it, right? To have ended it either through a call to his supporters who were engaged in that coup attempt, or through an order to the military and to other forces, to the National Guard, et cetera, to act upon it. He didn't do so. For 187 minutes, he sought to not only avoid any action to stop the violence, which left a number of people dead, hundreds injured, but also that during that time, in that window of opportunity that was opened, we now know he was calling U.S. senators, trying to get them to overturn the results of an election. Now, you put all those pieces together. If you told me that storyline from another country, right? You said, take the names away, take the personalities away. I would tell you that country would certainly be discussing.
Yeah, and it would be, as we say in modern vernacular, a no-brainer.
I'm afraid it would. And again, I often look at the United States from that perspective. I've had the opportunity to report from around the world a lot and to report on other countries. And so I think it's useful to have that perspective and to say, okay, if we stepped out of this circumstance and we just looked at the facts, what would we say? And I
And
think the
I would
reality is,
argue,
yeah,
John, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
go
interrupt
ahead.
you. I would argue that there were potential, in my opinion, potential treasonous actions, words and deeds by the former president uh, way before these 187 minutes, because he was calling state secretaries of state and elected officials on the state level way before these 187 minutes, already trying to put in fake electors. That in itself could probably, in my opinion, could be argued was treasonous as well. So it's time for our second break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. You don't want to go anywhere, as you can tell. This is probably the greatest political expert we've had on ever. Very insightful. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You could ask with an app if it works for you. You could write them a text or knit them a sweater. If you can't be together, you could write them a letter. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking. You could chat on the game, kick off your flip-flops. You could ask on your couch while you binge watch. However you do it, you gotta ask a friend. And if they don't share, you can ask again. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health. Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the JED Foundation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Vela, your host. It's great to have all of y'all with us. Oh my God, my inner Texan just came out. I said y'all. So our guest this week is John Nichols, globally acclaimed political writer, blogger. After this discussion, I'm just going to call him political expert. He is bringing us insightful and enlightening thoughts and aspects and perspectives on politics that, frankly, I had not. Here I thought I knew what the hell I was doing in politics until I met John Nichols. Wow.
Very kind, a little too kind, I think.
No, John, I'm serious. It's amazing. And I'll tell you what I love about you is you're not only brilliant in thought and in intellectualism, you're articulate, and you're able to speak about it in a way that I think that a layperson can understand. And that is a gift, my friend. That is a gift, seriously. So many times, people with your level of intellect, speak as Harvard MBA kind of lingo, right? And
well, luckily, I was blessed not to receive a Harvard MBA, so I can go through life with that freedom that some people don't have.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna just chalk it up to what is it? On Wisconsin. Yeah, it's those Wisconsin values, right? And you've never
At our best. Yeah,
you haven't forgotten where you came from, and I think it's like your ability to relate to the average person, and I think that comes from growing up in a rural part of any state, frankly, and there's a level of humility. So I commend you, and it's really a privilege to meet you. So is there anything else you want to share with us about your article called 187 Minutes of Treason? There's so much in there, and I want to do it justice. Let's say it that way.
Let me, and you're very kind. And we did have the article did go a lot of places. I think people were struck by this notion that we ought to discuss this word. And the one thing I will say is that I'm very dubious about the notion that Donald Trump would be convicted of treason. I don't think it'll happen. I frankly don't think that that's where the politics of the country or the governance is. I may be wrong. I mean, you'll see how things develop. But my sense is that it's important to put things in perspective and to understand the range of charges that Donald Trump could be facing. And then once we see the sort of outer limits of it, the outlines of it, then a charge of seditious conspiracy, which is very, very serious, could face as many as 20 years in jail. A charge of seditious conspiracy perhaps doesn't seem so unreasonable, right? We see it in perspective. And there's little doubt in my mind that Donald Trump did engage in seditious conspiracy. Little doubt that he was at the center of plotting to overturn the results of an election with the purpose of inserting himself as an illegitimate president of the United States.
Right.
And that conspiracy rose to a level of action. It wasn't just a discussion. And remember, in conspiracy, when you're talking about it, you don't have to actually implement. The fact that people are plotting something is of consequence. But when the plotting then leads to action, which is what we saw, and then to inaction, a refusal to act to end the violence, then you're in a situation where there, to my mind, almost certainly have to be some charges against Donald Trump, and we'll see what they are. There have been many, many proposals. But at the end of the day, I do think that whether people are comfortable with the word treason or not, whether they're comfortable with the concept of seditious conspiracy, what they do have to begin to wrap their head around is the prospect that a former president of the United States could face criminal charges in the very near future.
Yeah. And you know, I think you're the perfect person to discuss this with. I haven't had this conversation with anybody yet. But I think that one of the things I love about your article and what you're saying here today is you're kind of removing the politics out of this. And I would highly urge my fellow Democrats and fellow progressives to not make this political, but like you did, make it an intellectual, legal, ethical, decency, constitutional argument. And I think we have a much better chance of him seeing the walls of a prison if we keep the politics out of it, maybe keep the emotion out of it. How do you feel about that? I hadn't brought that up to anybody, but now that hearing you made me think that that's really what you're doing.
Well, I think it's really important. You know, a number of years ago, I wrote a history of impeachment and had to spend a lot of time studying the impeachments throughout American history and really in the global context. And then also looking at you know, kind of the back story of the word, the backstory of the concept. Now, we're not talking here about impeachment. We're talking about criminal action. But one of the things that was remarkable in doing that was to understand that when you impeach someone, a president, you don't impeach the person per se. What you're really trying to do is protect the office. You're trying to define the standards that someone holding that office should adhere to. And if someone has failed to do so, then you impeach them, you remove them. Again, not so much for the sake of punishment, but for the protection of the office, for the protection of the republic. Now, obviously, if you're talking about criminal charges, that's a very different thing. It's not the same as impeachment. And yet, when you're talking about someone as high-ranking as the president of the United States or the former president, I think you do have to put it in that perspective, that you go after this person, this individual, legally, not for the sake of punishing them, not because you hate them or not because you disagree with them, even though all those things may be in play. You do.
I was going to say.
Look, I'm not going to deny that. It'd be absurd to do so. But you do it because, and this is the most important concept, you want to make sure that never again will an occupant of the office of President of the United States act in the way that Donald Trump did.
Yeah, engage in that behavior. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And see, I think you just once again so articulately expressed what I was trying to say, which is that is looking at it through the eyes of the legal parameters, right? The constitutional parameters, because as you put it, protection of the office. You said something that is leading me to my next question, which was it's about protecting the existence of the republic. Before we go to our last break here, I want to ask you, do you feel, because of your incredible span of expertise in writing about all of these issues, do you feel the same sense of volatility for our democracy I think that so many of us are feeling right now? Or do you see it differently?
No, I just see, I sense the volatility. I think it's important to understand in some sort of historical context that we've had volatility before. I mean, there have been many, many times where the people of the United States have been afraid for their republic.
Yeah.
And it's not even in those high profile moments like obviously the founding moment, the War of 1812, the Civil War.
Yeah.
There have just been moments where we seemed as a country to be incredibly unstable. Remember, in a short period of about 5 years in the 1960s, we saw a president, John F. Kennedy, president's brother and candidate for president, former Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, and the leading civil rights leader, Martin Luther King Jr.,
Right.
as well as another prominent figure in activism, Malcolm X, all assassinated in this very, very short period of time. And you also had mass demonstrations, all sorts of other things going on. So I think people felt a great sense of volatility. So it's not uncommon. But I do think that what's unique about this moment is that volatility is so centered around one man and so centered on the actions of Donald Trump and those around him. That's different than most circumstances in our history. And it's something that we do have to pause and kind of pull back on. And as you suggest, make sure that we have some control over our emotions, some control over our political passions, and try and sort it out. Because I think at the end of the day, we do have to look at the actions of this individual. And, perhaps, and I expect will lead to a major moment in our history, and that is the prosecution of a former president of the United States for crimes against the republic.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And look, I mean, it's so healthy to hear these perspectives because I think that's what you do so well is you put things in perspective. And I think fear for all of us, right? We're scared.
Sure.
I think we all feel a nervousness and an anxiety and an instability, as you said. And it's not unprecedented, but this is our instability.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
It's our moment.
So we will be right back and pick up right where we're leaving off with John Nichols. Don't go anywhere. See you in a minute.
Hi, it's Practical Polly's radio show. If you're just figuring out that healthier cooking oils are better than solid fats, you may be asking, now what am I going to do with all these tubs of lard? Ever had one of those moments when your favorite skinny jeans feel too tightly tailored? Generously apply lard to your hips and thighs and those fancy pants will slide on like a dream. Or here's a family-friendly idea. How about making your yard into a lard fun park? Frost your driveway with a nice thick coating and give those kiddos a downhill thrill no matter what time of year. Having a bad hair day? Yep. A little lump of lard can tame your flyaways in a jiffy. So there's no need for that lard to go to waste or to your waste. But get your best heart-healthy trade-up with healthier oils like canola, olive, or other vegetable oils, which can actually lower your chances for heart disease. Now that's a tip worth keeping for life. Learn more at heart.org/facethefats. Canola Info is the national supporter of the American Heart Association's Face the Fats campaign.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Vedla, your host. My guest this week is incredible man, John Nichols. I have been in politics my entire adult life and my entire career in some form or fashion, as many of you know, at the highest levels of our government. And I'm not going to lie to you. This has been the most insightful conversation I think I've had about politics in many, many years, if not ever. So, John, I that's the highest compliment I think I can give anybody.
I take it as a great compliment.
you're teaching me at 60, and I just, what a great reminder that we can all keep learning until we take our last breath, right?
That's exactly right.
And so thank you for the education today. It's amazing. It really is. I want to move to a second article that's not written by you. Let me be very clear, but I want to get your take on it, especially after the time we've spent together and what I've heard from you. I definitely want to get your take on this. It was an article by Carol, I don't know how you say her last name, Leonig, Devlin Barrett, Josh Dawsey, and Spencer Sue at I think in the Washington Post, I believe. The title of the article is Justice Department Investigating Trump's Actions in the January 6th Criminal Probe. We're going to move away now from the 187 minutes of what we feel confident is probably treasonous activity. And now we're going to move to the investigation, I guess, that was just announced by the DOJ.
Just acknowledged, I think, is the proper term.
Acknowledged.
Yeah.
Okay, so probably has been in existence for hopefully a little while, and hopefully they're racking up all kinds of information, hopefully. But anyway, so what are your thoughts on that? Can I just say one thing before I throw it over to you that I hadn't thought of till I just said this? The man is nothing less is consistent.
Yes.
I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
Consistently bad.
Well, consistently at odds with the rule of law. I mean, that's
very well put.
And I think, Mo, this is an interesting thing, and it's a little bit of a deviation, but we'll get to the heart of your question.
Yeah.
You talk about having a lifetime in politics, and Donald Trump did not have that. Yeah. Donald Trump came to power after a very short, frankly, very lucky intervention in politics, right? He came in at a time when the Republican Party was really pulling apart at the seams, and he was able to take full advantage of it, push aside all their candidates. Then he went into a November election in 2016 at a point when the Democratic Party was also divided. Not everybody liked Hillary Clinton, and whether that's fair or not is a different issue, but it was the reality. And so you ended up in a situation where Donald Trump was able to, A, take control of one major party in the United States, actually relatively easily, and then to go into a very complex November election where he got a minority of the vote. He did not get the plurality. Hillary Clinton got 3 million.
We forget that.
And yet he assumes the presidency despite all of these factors. And he was not prepared for it. He didn't know anything about politics. He knew about exercising power, and he exercised power in the way that he had as a New York businessman, not as someone who, like you talk about, had a long time in politics and sort of knew the guardrails, knew the parameters. And so from the beginning, Trump operated outside of the basic standards of A, decency, I would argue, but B, constitutional and legal limits. And that's got him in a lot of trouble. It's 2 impeachments and now a criminal inquiry as well as a congressional inquiry and lots of other, at lower
ancillary.
Yeah. So the end result is that the guy's got a lot coming at him, and for good reason. Now, when we talk about the Department of Justice, this is an interesting thing because there's been some anger at the Department of Justice for not being more public about this.
Yeah.
Right? Well, here's the deal. You have different kinds of people that get appointed as Attorney General of the United States. Sometimes you will have a crusading Attorney General, someone who, uses that platform quite appropriately as a member of a cabinet and as a member of government to talk about the work that they seek to do. And you look back at the attorneys general in the 1960s when they were talking about civil rights and civil liberties and a host of other issues. We've had other attorneys general throughout history who fit that mold. That is not who Merrick Garland is. Merrick Garland is a judge. And even though he holds the title of attorney general, he still acts very much as a judge.
Like a judge,
Very cautious, very circumspect.
Discretionary, exactly. Very discretionary.
Yes. And so the end result is that I think we're starting to get an insight into how he's approaching this thing. I think he is taking it very seriously, but I think he also sees it as something where he does not want to say or do anything that messes up or undermines the case.
Or jeopardizes his case. Exactly. But like a good lawyer / judge would expect to do.
Yes.
We would expect.
I think so. And so I think what we've had revealed this week is a big deal, because now there has been this acknowledgement that there is an ongoing, very serious probe into the question of whether Donald Trump should be charged with criminal conspiracy, with crimes of various sorts. And from listening to Merrick Garland, it seems as if they're quite a ways down the track, that they've done a lot of work on this. And also, strikingly, now you see that judge persona come in a very useful way, because Garland is being asked, well, do you anticipate that you would prosecute Donald Trump if he was, again, a candidate for president? And there's talk that he may announce his candidacy for president in order to try and, circumvent prosecution. And Merrick Garland said, yeah, the rule of law applies to everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a candidate or, a ordinary citizen, whatever that may mean. And so I think that at the end of the day, Merrick Garland will actually come out as perhaps exactly the right person to be in this position, even though it's very frustrating to people who see Trump's high crimes and misdemeanors and think that action should be taken more aggressively and more quickly.
Well, and I think it'll be another chance to give kudos to Joe Biden for selecting him.
It could well turn out to be
because
a wise.
All those years, right, in the heading up the Judiciary Committee, and I think he knew the type of temperament that we needed in that role at this moment in time. Much like, and again, I'm deviating as well, but much like electing Joe Biden, we needed him at this moment in time, this inflection point in American history, to frankly save our democracy. But anyway, back to your thoughts on the probe in the sense of, do you think that it's a narrow probe? Is it just now maybe that he might have tried to tamper and intimidate witnesses that were coming before the congressional hearing? Or do you think it's a little broader than that?
I think it's broader, but what you're referring to, of course, is the Al Capone scenario, right? Where you have somebody who's committed all sorts of incredible crimes, like just, over the top crimes, and you get him on like tax evasion or something like that.
Right.
And is there a situation where Donald Trump might be prosecuted for something that seems like a much lesser crime rather than the big ticket ones? I will tell you that I certainly hope that's not the case, because when you're going after a former president of the United States, if you're going to go to the trouble of prosecuting, you better have a pretty serious charge. You don't want to go for something that's a mid-level charge or a minor charge that would lead the reasonable person to say, well, come on, why are we really doing this? You want to have it be something profound and something serious that merits prosecution. And so my hope is, and my sense is, knowing a lot of people around the Department of Justice, that they wouldn't waste our time with a lesser charge. And this is, by the way, I don't want to diminish the lesser charges. I think they're real and important. Tampering with a witness is hugely significant. I'm not trying to diminish that. I'm just trying to say.
And in particular, that particular setting, it's, for some reason, it seems even more egregious.
It is egregious, and there's no question of that. However, if you're going to a level of prosecution, this high level thing, you need to have a serious charge. And I think that's why I earlier referred to seditious conspiracy, which I think is the likely most serious charge that might be brought. That's a hard one to prove. It's a hard case to make. But I think that the January 6th committee is going to hand down such a package of evidence that it's going to be hard to avoid that charge.
Yeah, and I think not bringing it after what we anticipate will be presented, or has already been presented, and that will ultimately be presented to the DOJ. I think you're right, is going to raise all kinds of speculation and questions and doubts about the legal system, frankly, and jurisprudence. John, we're at the end of our time together, and really, we have to have you back if you would be so kind as to come back at some point, because I am now convinced I could talk to you all day. I know that you don't want to talk to me all day, but if we can find another time together, that would be amazing. I'm sure our viewers and listeners feel the exact same way. You've been absolutely amazing, insightful, poignant, just articulate. Thank you, John Nichols. We will all be reading everything you write, I promise. And everybody go buy his book. Wherever you can find it, go buy his book.
Thanks, Mo. It's an honor to be with you. Thanks for having me.